Live from Palo Alto, in the heart of Silicon Valley, it's theCUBE, covering I.O. Brought to you by I.O. Now, here are your hosts, John Furrier and Peter Burris.
Okay, welcome back everyone. We are here live at the Rosewood Hotel in Silicon Valley on Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park for the I.O. Conversations event called Data Center as a Service. This is theCUBE. It's our flagship program. We go out to the events and extract the signal from the noise. I'm John Furrier with my co-host today, Peter Burris, Head of Research at SiliconANGLE. Meet Peter. We basically had some great guests. I.O. Data Centers is a company that has having an intimate event, but it's kind of like a thought leadership industry event, but with a little bit of their kind of sales kind of vibe, but mostly thought leadership around the future of the data center. We talked to some great guests talking about security all the way up to modular data centers to ultimately cloud.
Yeah, and John, data center. Data center. You can imagine Allen Iverson saying it over and over and over and becoming an internet sensation. It's hard to imagine that data centers can be interesting if you listen to the general scuttlebutt of the industry. But this is where the promise of virtualization in the cloud either happens or doesn't. Is where do you put this stuff? How do you handle the environmentals? How do you deal with security? And it's very clear that as all this transformation in business, digital business, and how it impacts your software assets, how it impacts your data, all of that has an enormous impact on how you think about where you put the systems and the facilities for actually running them.
You had a comment on one of the earlier interviews today, and you used the word hyperconvergent in context to one of the conversations, but also we've been covering hyperconverged as one of those industry terms, but it brings up a different scope of context, which is with the data center, with the cloud, the things you mentioned, it's all converging in at a whole nother level, and it really is the power source for everything that we do in life. The phones we use, mobility is huge, Internet of Things, wearables, AI, all this stuff is now happening at a software level, and now the transformation under the hood, if you will, the power engine of innovation is the compute, it's the networking, it's the storage, it's the software, all traditionally run in data centers. Yeah. And now that's completely being disrupted because of the demand for a new kind of utility of applications.
Yeah, that's very true, John. And let's face it, that the design parameters that people have for thinking about what they do with their data centers are moving away from where is the physical asset going to be located to where's the event, how far away from the event will the data need to travel, will the environmentals be conducive to making sure we can handle the compute, should we move it closer to an energy source, do we have the talent? I mean, we heard today that that on a global basis, or maybe I think it was actually just in the US, we are 1.6 million people down for in terms of knowledgeable security professionals. 1.6 million people fewer than we have or than we need are available. Now that puts an enormous pressure on improving the productivity of all these facilities. And in many respects, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the data center no longer being a place as much as it is will be a set of tasks that need to be performed and who performs them.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up another interesting point there, and we were weaving in some of our interviews about the notion of work and how people organize around it. But now as you go deeper into the stack, the low levels, it's a new fabric of infrastructure powered by software and run on networks with a potentially abundance of compute power. So now a new dynamic is being created around things that are traditionally old networking terms like latency, virtualization. These concepts are now the new variables in a new definition of communicating within cloud. So we're seeing that the land grab, if you will, is the glue layer between clouds, or interclouding, or things in the stack where applications need to depend upon. So there's a little nuance there, but it's interesting dynamic that you're either going to be a cloud provider and have the scale, or you're going to be an orchestrator, deliverable of something.
Of the services. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what. So are you going to own the physical assets and make them available through a variety of different packaging mechanisms, like an Amazon or an Azure? We had one guest. We asked specifically how many of these types of entities will there be, and nobody knows, because we're still in a very nascent stage in understanding what really constitutes the value add that a lot of these guys will provide. But on the other hand, there's very much this notion that over the long term that we're going going to see the concept of data as an asset take front and center in thinking about a variety of different conversations, not only down at the low level, but also further up. And we actually think about digital business where data is a factor in thinking about how you design, ultimately even design your business. But look, the cloud in many respects is not really a system story. It's really a networking story. The cloud is in many respects a networking or a networked programming model. And we're still trying to understand how that's going to play itself out over the next few years.
Yeah, we had some interesting reading the tea leaves, if you will, in these interviews. And one of the things that popped out for me was, I'd love to get your take on some of the learnings you extracted, but to me it was the networking is the cloud, and obviously internetworking around clouds is going to be key. But you mentioned something about the house, the difference between scarcity of power and then the emphasis on data, and that brings up the notion of if it's network computing, distributed computing, all those kind of paradigms, the software brings the operating system at the business level. So you have this interesting kind of dynamic between, okay, plumbing and stuff, software glue, and then I'm going to create an operating model in software, fully instrumented at the business level. And then you throw the wrinkle in from the Chernoff group. We had Jim Flagging on earlier talking about the dynamics of security. But is that a data problem? So all these things are intertwined in Converged. So very interesting insight. What was your some takeaways from today?
Well, so I think one of the key takeaways is, as we heard, kind of almost looking at it from a sequencing standpoint. First off, this rather fascinating relationship between energy and data. Now, quite frankly, in all honesty, that is not just by chance. There is a truly physical relationship between these two. If you think about information theory, it looks a lot like thermodynamics, just flipped on its side, if you will. So this notion between energy and data, that relationship is going to become more important. For example, even in our research, folks like to talk about free energy, which is the energy that's made available for work. Here at SiliconANGLE Wikibon, we like to talk about free data that is made available for work. So we're going to hear more about this relationship between data and energy over the next few years, and the role that the data center is going to play as a way of taking energy and using it to translate it or transform it into data that's available for the organization.
That's a great way to think about it. I mean, ironically, energy, obviously power being the source for the data center, but but your analogy is interesting because you think of things like basic concepts like potential energy.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Data has potential to do something.
Absolutely right.
Now, if it's not available, you'll never know if that one piece of data from a database that may or may not be part of the system injected into a retail transaction or an autonomous vehicle in real time could change the impact of the context.
Absolutely, John, and it actually goes even beyond that because, look, right now you and I are talking, we have visual cues, and these cameras are picking us up and turning into a digital stream that's going over the internet, and Ustream, a lot of people can watch us as a consequence. But most business is still conducted in an analog world, which is okay because human beings are inherently analog.
Yep.
So IoT, when you think about IoT, in many respects, IoT will be the basis for taking that analog world and turning it into digital streams that then become available for work. This is a fundamental feature of digital business. How are we going to make more data available for work so that we can be more plastic in our approach, engage customers faster, process things more predictably, all kinds of goodness that's associated with digital business all starts with the idea that we create free data that's available for work.
The interesting thing, I was looking at our last guest, we had Jabez Tan, who's from structure research, mostly Asia Pacific research. Interesting comment. Let's not forget the simplicity of what the impact of what China is doing and what it illustrates, which is, let's not forget that mobility, the notion of mobile, is the center of the action. So China's advancement of their mobile growth, mobility is obviously pretty popular in the Asia Pacific area. So now back to mobile, that's going to be the real driver on the infrastructure side. So mobile's driving cloud native, workloads, all those things. Again, let's not forget the simple notion of mobile.
Oh, it's not just China either. I mean, I was in South Africa last year, and every single country that didn't spend trillions of dollars in building out a wire-based telecommunications infrastructure is completely avoiding that set of investments, and they're going mobile everything. This is how Africa is going to work. It's how Asia is going to work. With the exception of Japan, they are moving straight. They're going straight to wireless because the infrastructure costs are dramatically reduced. So that is all. It's a great point, and that fact is going to make it a lot easier to connect more devices, instrument things differently. People are going to start there and presume that that's, I mean, look, you and I are old enough that, I mean, certainly I'm old enough to remember time sharing on teletype machines. Well, you know, today it starts with the idea of your computer or your device moving with you. And that's the design point for all future applications.
Well, we're here at the Rosewood Hotel on Sand Hill Road, where all the VCs, in fact, Mark Andreessen's office at Andreessen Horowitz is literally 2 doors down. We've got VCs all around us. But Mark Andreessen, I bring that up because, you know, he wrote that seminal article in the Wall Street Journal, Software's Eating the World, how software is powering the world. And again, software is the key in all of these CUBE conversations we're having with people here on theCUBE.
Well, yes, it is, John, but we also can't forget that, you know, gosh, it was probably 70 years ago now, maybe more, 75 years ago, you know, John von Neumann defined a modern computer architecture, and one of the key features of it, actually, and Turing, one of the key features of it was the idea that software is data. It's all data. It's a special kind of data. It's a data that has, you know, ideally extremely low entropy because it's all coded into instructions and it uses data. So Andreas is right, software is eating the world, but businesses need to think about software as one of their data assets, one of many data assets. Now, hopefully we won't be creating software quite as fast as we are today creating data, but there's going to be an enormous, I mean, the amount of software that's going to be created over the next few years is going to eclipse everything that's ever been done before.
You know, the other thing that I walked away from here today is a clear picture of, I can see the clear vision now in terms of how the data center dynamic will play out, and obviously one of them is the power relationship. Where do you source the power? We had some great guests on there. But the other one is an area that you've been working a lot on the research, and that is designing around data. So 2 design criteria to think about for folks looking at the data center of the future and how to deal with the dynamics, whether it's economics, CapEx, OpEx, is design around power and design around data. And obviously keep security in mind across both. But that's really, I mean, breaking it down, I mean, is there anything else? I mean, what else can they design around?
At the end of the day, we're still going to have to design around people. I think that in many respects, the presumption that we're all going to be out of a job or we're all going to be able to sit on the beach and, you know, somebody's going to be providing us a salary is probably not particularly accurate. But at the end of the day, data is on the ascension. Yep. A lot of the physical access we normally associate with business are moderating in terms of their ability to add net new value. Energy's scarce resource, going to become scarcer, going to become that much more important. A lot of new technologies, we should probably be thinking about that in our research and some of what theCUBE does. So those are going to be 2 crucial features overall. And then people, because at the end of the day, at least for the foreseeable future, people are still going to be the net creators of insights, models, and the software that makes us all go.
That's a great point, absolute point. People, data, and the power. We're wrapping up, or summarizing, we have one more interview with the CEO of I/O, who will be on I/O Conversations here, his event about the data center as a platform, of course. Check out our new CUBE Fridays podcast. Every Friday, myself and Peter Burris will be sitting down, whether he's remote or in studio in Palo Alto, to bring you some video, which is more like a radio show, but it's mostly designed for audio. It's going to be available on iTunes and SoundCloud and all outlets. Download it. It's for when you're at the gym. We're going to be breaking down the news for 30 minutes, top news stories, the most important stories. We're going to analyze them, extract the signal, talk about the impact, and then do an extended edition with interviews with thought leaders and experts every Friday. Of course, go to SiliconANGLE.com, SiliconANGLE.tv, and Wikibon.com. It's a great research. Peter, to give you the final word on this wrap up in this day, where does this vector into your research and the team that's looking at the research agenda? How does this input into your world?
Well, I think as I leave the conversations today, John, I think I say this, that the practices of making sure computers work and operate, that networks deliver what they're expected, and that business understands the implications of things like security are not going away. How we institute those practices That's what's under transformation right now. And we saw a lot of companies today that have a lot of different options for how you institute those practices in different models of data center. But I think ultimately what big users need to worry about is the practices. You gotta still be good at this stuff. And then once you're good at it, you can have more control over how you want to institute the way the work gets done, whether it's through partners, whether you do it yourself, whether it's on-premise or it's in the cloud. But it still has to get done.
How about competitive advantage? As this becomes a competitive strategy point, we hear about risk management all the time, but Dan, when you think about risk management, that plays into strategy. People are in business to make money for profit. So they have to have a strategy and differentiation. How does all this play into the competitive strategy?
So here's where I say I'm not sure, but I'll say this, that what I think is becoming increasingly clear is that the traditional model of competitive strategy, which is fundamentally based on scarcity or scarce assets. So if you think about what Porter said many years ago, his 4-factor model, it all basically starts with pick the industry you want to be in based on the arrangement of assets, pick the position in industry that you want, and then pick the games that you want to play to get to the position that you want. So it all starts with this notion of fixed, scarce assets that are organized similarly in industries, pick the position you want, and then what games you want to play. When we start talking about data, a lot of that goes out the door, because now I can bring data programming to all those assets, and I can move from being a technology company to being a financial services company, or I can move from being a merchandiser to a technology company, or an industrial equipment company like GE to a technology company. Software makes it possible because it lowers asset specificity to do a lot of things. So the whole notion of competitive strategy is going to change pretty dramatically. But to answer your question,
and that's exciting, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
It's going to be really incredible.
We're rewriting the business playbook from scratch in many respects. We still know that you still need cash, you still need people, you still need information, you still need resources. You know, there's some basics that are still in place, but the opportunities for rearranging them as we move into we move through this digital transformation process are pretty significant. But ultimately, John, I think that the whole concept of competitive strategy is that is what we're going to discover is that just as we often say that the value of data depreciates very quickly with time, but then you find someone who took data that's 4 years old and they turned it into an absolute genius insight that revolutionized their industry. Data is very context rich. Yeah. It's really how are you going to use it and when are you going to use it really determines the value. And just as today's data may look like it's not worth something, but it may suddenly become very, very valuable. So the way that we think about competitive strategy, or the insight that we get tomorrow, may be based on stuff that we threw away today. Yeah. It's like junk DNA of business. Yeah. We just don't know. But what we do know is that smart people using this stuff, using data,
it's an opportunity. I mean, people, the pecking order of the industry leaders can move very quickly,
and it does
at any time.
And it absolutely does. I mean, look, I'm old enough, you're old enough to remember when Amazon first announced that they were going to do this notion of, we're going to sell IT as a package, and most people scoffed.
Yeah, they did. No one understood it. A lot of people didn't. Were like, just a developer cloud.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, or storage cloud, or a place you just put the, And today it is a dominant feature of planning discussions in almost all businesses. And even when it isn't, you sit down and you talk. And I've had 4 conversations with CIOs over the last 6 weeks about this. Even when they don't talk about the cloud, they tell you why they're not talking about the cloud. Yeah. There's always a reason to not be doing it. It's going to shape everything that IT does, everything that business does, even if it's by negating or through some negative way by saying, oh no, we're not gonna do it. We're too sophisticated. We're okay. Yeah. Let's watch what happens.
It's super exciting, and of course we love it because we can document it, we can analyze it, and most importantly, talk to the people who are making it happen.
That's right.
That's what theCUBE is all about. And again, our special presentation here at the Rosewood is concluding. We have one more interview with the CEO of IO, who will be on shortly. That's a wrap for us. That's our kind of closing thoughts. here in Silicon Valley. This is theCUBE. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for one more interview. We'll be right back with that shortly.
Hi, I'm John Furrier, the co-founder of SiliconANGLE Media and co-host of theCUBE.
Hi, I'm Stu Miniman. I've been an analyst with Wikibon and a co-host of theCUBE since 2010.
To me, creating technology that starts a company and creates value and jobs is probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever been involved in. And I bring that energy to theCUBE because theCUBE is where all the ideas are and where the experts are, where the people are. And I think what's most exciting about theCUBE is that we get to talk to people who are making things happen. Entrepreneurs, CEO of companies, venture capitalists, people who are really on a day in and day out basis building great companies.
We really believe that theCUBE is a unique property. We help both the practitioners share with their peers what's happening, as well as give a broad audience a view to what's coming down the road, how to take advantage of that. We give people an insight into what's happening in events. It's a great way to learn more, to find more about people, and to take advantage of some of that technology.
In the technology business, there's just not a lot of real-time live TV coverage, and theCUBE is a non-linear TV operation. We do everything that the TV guys on cable don't do. We do longer interviews, we ask tougher questions. It's not prompted and scripted, it's a conversation, it's authentic. And for shows that have theCUBE cover it, it makes the show buzz. It creates excitement. More importantly, it creates great content, great digital assets that can be shared instantaneously to the world.
This is Stu Miniman. Thanks for watching theCUBE.
Hi, I'm John Furrier. Thanks for watching theCUBE.
I remember when I had such a fantastic batting practice, I walked by a couple of sports writers in that era.
Hall of Famer Reggie Jackson.
It was like,
You're rocking it out there.
I kind of hope I didn't leave it out here.
Reggie Jackson.
When the game started, I got back in that moment. I got back in what was live, what was now.
Goodbye.
I went and did something with ESPN earlier this year with Stephen Curry. They said, Reggie, we want you to come up and watch his practice, his pregame. You know, it was very similar to your batting practice where people come out and watch, etc. And I watched the dribbling exhibition, I watched the going between the legs and the behind the back and the fancy passing, etc. And I watched the shots. And the guy asked me what I thought of the show. And I said, well, it's a cool show, but I'm going to see all that tonight. He does all that.
He brought it into the game.
Yeah, I said, so it's not a show, but that's his game.
Mr. October.
I think our world now, with the instant gratification of sending out a message or tweeting to someone or whatever, certainly in the moment, is about what our youth is and who we are today as a country, as a universe.
Congratulations, Reggie Jackson. You are CUBE alumni.